I was at a wedding. No shit. Actually, I was getting ready for the wedding when it happened, and I was at the reception when I found out. But yeah, it was the day of a buddy of mine's wedding. I was best man, actually. No shit. The reception was fucking weird, I'll tell you that. I drunk dialed my boss.
I can imagine. I'm surprised they even held the reception.
Well, nobody there knew what had happened. Nobody in the wedding party had a cell phone. I mean, I'm sure some of the guests did, but, I didn't. The bride and groom didn't. The maid of honor, groomsmen, none of us did, And we were already out of the house by the time it happened. A lot of people just didn't show up, of course, and we didn't find out why until we got back to the answering machine. Obviously, when the ceremony was over, someone must have got a phone call, and it wasn't long before everyone knew, but if anyone did know at the wedding, they didn't say anything about it.
That's quite the story. I've heard quite a few 9/11 stories before, but I don't think I've ever met anyone that was at a wedding. Wasn't it on a weekday?
Yeah, well, it was important to them that they get married on September 11th. I forgot exactly why. I think the bride's dead aunt's birthday or something like that. I guess they figured if they gave everyone a year's notice, they could take a Tuesday off for a wedding. I was the only one in from out of town, and I took the whole week off because I was the best man. And, that's not the fucked up part, though.
No?
Well, I mean, obviously 9/11 was fucked up, but, okay, I never told this to anyone before, but, okay, so if I say something completely fucking insane, like what,
Are you thinking of hurting someone?
Oh, no, nothing like that.
Are you thinking of hurting yourself?
No.
No, you don't have to tell me anything you don't want to tell. But this is the last place in the world you should worry about sounding crazy.
Yeah, okay, so I never told this story before. I know it sounds cliche, but I've been trying to forget it. I mean, it might take me a while to organize my thoughts. Okay, so the summer before is when all that shit with Becca happened that I told you about earlier. So I was taking a semester off, and I was working in a warehouse in Spokane. It didn't pay great, and it was tedious as fuck. We didn't have podcasts in those days, or at least I didn't know about them. But I did okay for a 21-year-old bachelor who likes ramen. Honestly, it was worth it just for the 410 schedule. I didn't need healthcare. What's a 21-year-old going to do with healthcare? Anyways, the tedium kind of helped. I had a lot to process. Now, Dave, that's the guy that was getting married. Me and him go way back. He's like this guy. Okay, the first time I met him, he explained to me what necropants are. Apropos of nothing, I mean, we're the same age. We were like 16 at the time. But it was like legitimately apropos of nothing. Like I walked into the library with a mutual friend of ours, and he introduced us, and Dave said, "Do you know what necropants are?" And I said I didn't, and he just went ahead and explained it to me in graphic detail. I mean, when you're that age, you can kind of rattle off shit about necropants to a total stranger. I kind of miss that. I mean, I don't miss being a teenager, but I do feel like you don't get small talk like that as an adult.
I'm sorry, what are necropants?
Okay, so if I remember correctly, and there's a good chance I'm getting this totally wrong, but if I remember correctly, this is something they apparently used to do in medieval Iceland. So let's say you're a warlock, right? You're an Icelandic warlock, and you might say to your best friend, "Hey, when you die, can I have your leg skin?" Maybe your friend is also a warlock, and it's like a mutual pact or whatever. I don't think you can just kill a guy and make necropants. I think you have to get his permission first. And it's got to be a guy. Maybe. I guess it could be a trans chick. I don't know what the rules about trans shit in medieval Iceland. But anyways, you got to have a ball sack. That's the point. And so your friend dies, and you get his permission. And first you flay off the skin below the waist. And you got to be real careful, because if you nick it or whatever, it won't work. And you take all the skin off the bottom half of his body, and you put it on, like pants. And what is supposed to happen then, it would fit onto you, like skin-tight pants. And you could never take them off, and it was like every night or every full moon or some shit like that. Every so often, 2 gold coins would come from the scrotum of the necropants.
Interesting bit of folklore.
Always made me think, as long as that legend was around, like, surely someone somewhere tried it. Hell, maybe it worked for all we fucking know.
Seems unlikely.
Yeah, well.
So, this boy explained necropants to you when you met him?
Dave, yeah, and he said all that, and then he asked if I would wear necropants, and I said no. And he asked if he could have my legs when I died, and I said, sure, why not? And from sophomore year to pretty much the time I left town, we were at each other's house like at least once or twice a week. I mean, I had my first drink with Dave. He introduced me to Butthole Surfers. We tried to start a D&D group, but nobody wanted to DM, so we stole weed from his dad and talked shit. Dave was actually the first person outside my family I ever saw naked. Not that we were like, I mean, we weren't gay or anything like that. It's just, just boy stuff, Anyway, I went to University of Washington, and he went to Onondaga Community College. You know how it is when you go to college. You make new friends. I assume he did too. We only saw each other when I was in town. And when he got a place up in Albany in 99, we didn't really see each other much at all. So, yeah, like I said, that shit with Becca happened. And I think all my new friends were moving back to their classes. And all my old friends across the country didn't even know Becca. So it was like, I would like still go out and shit. But I wouldn't really like feel comfortable, having fun, connecting with people. And I don't know, I just started feeling really anxious and isolated. Like I didn't know what to do about it. So Dave's wedding was kind of like a waypoint for that part in my life, if that makes sense. And yeah, with the 410 schedule I was working, it wasn't hard to arrange it so that I could work Sunday through Wednesday, fly out Thursday, stay at their place until the wedding, and then fly back Tuesday night and drink a lot of coffee on Wednesday. That way I wouldn't need to take a day off. You can do shit like that when you're 21.
Sounds like you were looking forward to some much-needed socializing.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'd never met Lisa before. I guess they met in college. She got an associate's in graphic design and a job in Albany, and he moved out there with her. They came to meet me at the airport, and she looked just like the chick from The Craft. What's her name? The hot one. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm afraid I haven't seen The Craft.
Nancy, that was her name. Yeah, she looked just like Nancy from The Craft. You've seen the pictures, I'm sure. The goth one. She looked like that.
Your friend's fiancé reminded you of this character from The Craft.
Nancy, yeah. I mean, yes and no. She was pale and she was hot, and she had the same hair and dressed kind of goth-like, black turtlenecks, long skirts, lots of necklaces. She even had those, like, big green eyes, But she was like Nancy from The Craft was this, like, bombastic, devious, she had that smile, that big, reckless, toothy smile, and Lisa was always kind of the opposite of that. She was quiet. She laughed and smiled with her mouth closed. At first I thought there was something about me that made her uncomfortable.
Some people are always uncomfortable around strangers.
That was what I thought, and I'm a big, scruffy dude. A lot of women, dogs, and children get nervous around me before they get to know me. I don't blame them. It don't hurt my feelings. It's whatever, but that's not what it was.
So what was it?
It was... I'll get to it. This is a long story, and like I said, I never told this to anybody, so bear with me. I'm thinking.
Take your time.
Where was I?
They picked you up at the airport.
Right, yeah. So, I almost didn't recognize Dave when I saw him. He was, he'd grown a beard, but also, honestly, I hate to say it, but he looked like shit. I mean, hell, I can say it. He's not here. You don't know him. When I first saw him, my first thought was that he'd gotten into hard drugs. That look people get? Not aged. He didn't look aged, but, worn. There weren't wrinkles on his face. He was too young, but you could see where they would be, It's a look you usually only see in junkies and cancer patients and homeless people. And I thought I would have heard if he'd gotten cancer or was homeless, so I guess, I thought he was gotten into crack or meth or something. Maybe even just drinking. Alcohol can really age the fuck out of you, but it wasn't any of those things, I don't think. So I hugged him, and I shook her hand, and they had this smell about them. I mean, they both reeked of cigarettes and incense, but there was a weird smell under that. I couldn't tell quite what it was. I don't know how to describe the smell, except that it was this, like a chemical smell, and for some reason it made me think about blackouts and ghost stories. Their car had the same smell, kind of, but with more incense. And their apartment, the windows were open all the time. The fans were on even at night, but there was still this smell there. And okay, you definitely had the incense and the cigarettes, but the whole place smelled really strongly of pine sol. And Okay, so they had this family recipe. I think they said it was from Lisa's uncle, or so they decided, or so they said that they decided at the last minute that they were going to make a bunch of bottles of hot sauce as what do you call them? Wedding favors. And I guess the recipe called for them to boil down a shitload of vinegar. So the apartment always had this weird blend of smells. I had to wash the clothes I had brought twice when I finally got home. But yeah, so we got there, and Dave asks me if I want to go to the bar, and I say sure. And Lisa says she's just going to stay behind and make hot sauce, and I said I wouldn't mind hanging out at the apartment, and maybe going and getting some beers and coming back, and, because I was there to help out, and she just said, no, you guys catch up, I'm sure you have a lot of catching up to do, and I didn't really get why this meant that we had to hang out at the bar, but, she really didn't seem to mind, and Dave seemed like he really wanted to go to the bar, so I didn't push the issue. And so, yeah, we went to the bar, and the bar we went to was only a couple of blocks away from their apartment, and we got some whiskey, and he hands me a cigar. God, I miss smoking in bars. Yeah, so we had a few drinks, and we smoked a couple of cigars, and a bunch of cigarettes. You know how it is when you're drinking, and you're with someone who smokes a lot, you know what I mean?
Sure.
You ever smoke?
No, but I understand that a lot of people smoke more heavily when they've been drinking.
Especially when you're with someone who smokes a lot.
I can understand that.
I mean, I don't mean to get hung up on minor details, but that whole week, I mean, around that time, I was smoking probably 2 packs a week or so, right? But that week I went through 5 packs. That's almost a pack a day. Same with drinking. I hardly ever drank back at home at that point, because I spent a lot of my time alone, and of all the fucked up habits I acquired over the years, drinking alone just was never one of them. Just doesn't appeal to me. It was like, great, now I'm sad and drunk. But yeah, they were constantly, the whole weekend, buying me drinks, giving me cigarettes. It was like, you ever see Wake and Fright?
I'm afraid I haven't.
It's this Australian movie from the 70s, and this guy goes to this town in the outback, and everyone keeps buying him drinks, and I guess you gotta see it, but it was like that.
It's not unusual for people to drink more heavily when they're in a celebratory mood.
Yeah. But yeah, so his alarm, he had an alarm set on his cell phone, and it was funny. It was one of those. It was one of those where the alarm is a ringtone, and he held it up to his ear, and then it went off in his ear, and I laughed, and he said, "I'll be right back," and he left.
He just left.
Yeah, he said he'd be right back. Like I said, I was pretty drunk, so at first I thought he'd gotten a phone call and left, so I didn't really think about it till later, and I finished my whiskey, and I got up and got a beer. Always been a firm believer in that rhyme.
Rhyme?
Liquor before beer,
I've never heard that one.
Really? Well, it's not important, don't worry about it. My point is, I'm sitting there, and I'm having my beer, and it's bugging me, because, okay, he answered it like a call, but then he realized it was an alarm. Okay, I get it, he was drunk, but, it's not like he got a call and realized that he had to go. He set an alarm because he knew this whole time he would have to go. So he had plenty of time to tell me he would have to go, and where and when, and I mean, I wasn't mad or anything. I was just confused, So I finished that beer, I get another one, he comes back, and I ask him where he's gone, and he said he went home. So, I mean, this is what he told me, and I believed him at the time. He said that Lisa went to bed at 9:30 exactly every night. He said it was because of some medication she was on. He gets real quiet, and he tells me she was diagnosed with bipolar as a teenager. And then he rushes to assure me that she hasn't had an episode in years, and as long as she stays on her medication, she's fine, and that I really shouldn't look down at her for all that, and which, I mean, I didn't, but yeah, the medication they got her on starts wearing off at 9, and she's got to take her sleeping pill at 9, or she could have an episode which would cause her to go off her meds, or something like that.
That's not how bipolar medications work.
Yeah, but at the time, all I knew about bipolar was that Courtney Love had it, and a lot of people thought that was why she shot Kurt, I mean, and don't forget, this guy was like my best friend growing up. Why it never occurred to me that he would lie to me.
Understandable. It is sort of a strange thing to lie about.
Right? So we get back, and like I said, I'm sleeping on their couch. Dave went to bed while I was brushing my teeth. And then I walked back into the living room, and that chemical smell was kind of lingering in the air. Their bedroom must have reeked of it. It smelled like gasoline, only not. I don't know. It was hard to sleep there. Partly it drove me crazy that I couldn't identify the smell, but also generally just the fact of how bad it smelled in there. And partly, obviously, new bed, or couch, rather. Partly, I don't know. I don't know what it was about that place, but even drunk, I just couldn't get to sleep. You ever have insomnia when you're drunk?
I can't say that I have.
It sucks. It's bullshit. You're just sitting there drunk, and usually when I got my insomnia, I can just get up and read a few hours and then try again. But you can't read when you're drunk, or at least I can't. And, they were trying to sleep, so I couldn't put on music or I couldn't watch TV. And, it was like 2001, so there was no phone to scroll through. And, again, I was pretty drunk, so I couldn't even think clearly. But I was just laying there, waiting, staring at the ceiling, feeling queasy and bored. Then, of course, comes the worries that I couldn't do anything about at the time, the reliving embarrassing moments from my childhood, the nameless guilt, paranoid anxiety, and I couldn't deal with any of it because my fucking brain wasn't working right now because I was drunk. Anyways, gradually I realized there was this weird sound coming from the bedroom. It wasn't like it was a low mechanical humming. I don't know why it bothered me so much. It was like that smell, or Lisa's weird attitude, or that shit about Dave's alarm set at 9:30, because even then, I don't think I really bought that bipolar medication shit. It was like 9:30 on the dot every day, and he always dropped everything to go in and do something with her at exactly 9:30 every night.
Well, I don't mean to be indelicate, but they were a young couple on the eve of their wedding.
Yeah, I also assumed they were fucking, but I don't know. I'll get to that. I'm sorry. I promise there really is a point to this story. I'll get to it, I promise. I know it seems like I'm meandering to avoid, I never told this story to anyone, and I've never heard anyone tell a story like this either. I saw with my own eyes, but I was drunk, and what I saw made no sense. I already know you won't believe me, but okay. I think I'll just keep telling my story, trying to tell you in the order of how it happened. Maybe it'll make more sense that way. I don't know.
It's your story. You can tell it however you want.
I'm not so sure it is my story, but I guess, I am the one telling it, so. Okay. Next morning, this is another thing. Lisa woke up at 5:30 every morning. No alarm, no nothing. Whatever was making that humming noise would shut off at 5, and it would make a chug 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 sound and then just shut off, and then she would get out of bed at 5:30. She got up and she made us this fucking amazing breakfast. It was like pancakes and bacon and home fries, and oh my fucking god, those home fries. Let me tell you, nothing is better when you're hungover than a big greasy breakfast. And I got up when she got up because I hadn't really been sleeping anyways. So this was the first chance I had to really talk to her. Don't forget, I'd never really met her before this week. So I talked to her a bit, and it was awkward. I definitely got the impression she was a really sweet woman. Here she was making us breakfast, and she was saying, I figured you guys would be feeling really shitty today. So here she was making us breakfast, not in spite of, but because of the fact that we had been out drinking while she was at home working on the hot sauce for the wedding. So yeah, obviously she was a real keeper, not to mention she was hot as hell, but there was something, I kind of got the sense that I made her uncomfortable, which made me uncomfortable. Not she didn't say anything, but I was about to be the best man at her wedding, and she just, I don't know, I do know now, but at the time it was like she was secretly waiting for me to say or do something fucked up. And I didn't take it personal. I knew I shouldn't take it personal, and I didn't, but she was uncomfortable, and that made me uncomfortable. I don't think of myself as the type of dude women are uncomfortable around. So I tried to help her, but mostly just got in the way because I didn't know my way around the kitchen, and I'm a really shitty cook, so then I settled for just leaning on the counter, trying to shoot the shit with her. But then after a bit I gave up, and it was just me asking asinine small talk type questions and her politely answering them. But one thing that was odd And it took me a minute to notice, but she was wearing makeup. I mean, she was in her bathrobe, and her hair wasn't done, but she was wearing makeup. Like she'd slept in her makeup, or put on makeup before leaving her bedroom. I don't know, it was weird. Like, not even all of it, you know? Like I said, she wore thick, black, goth makeup, like the chick from The Craft, but this morning, she wasn't wearing eyeliner, or lipstick, or mascara she'd been wearing the day before. She just happened to have put on foundation. I wanted to ask her why, but I mean, she acted nervous when I asked her what her job was like. And like, I don't know, some women are weird about makeup, and I guess I just thought it was none of my business, which I mean, it wasn't. And it was kind of a relief when Dave got up. It was obvious she wasn't comfortable with me, which made me uncomfortable with her, but he was, or at least he seemed, comfortable with both of us. So he comes out in his boxers, and he slaps me on the shoulders, and he says, "Mimosas?" And I'd never had mimosas before, so I said, "Sure." And he says, "Lisa?" And she just nods, and he poured mimosas for the three of us. And we stood around the kitchen, drinking them, while Lisa finished making breakfast, and I noticed how much weight Dave had put on. He was developing a pretty pronounced beer gut. You gotta remember, the guy was only 22. He was only 4 months older than me, and my birthday is in October, and his is in June. And he'd always been in pretty good shape. I mean, I'm not gay or anything, but honestly, it was tough to see. It'd been only 2 years since I'd seen him, and honestly, he didn't look the way people look when their metabolism slows down and they get fat. It was like his eyes were sunken, and he had a very pronounced beer gut. He looked the way someone looks when their drinking starts catching up with them and they keep drinking. You know what I mean? Everything about him had this like sagging resignation. He couldn't hide it, no matter how hard he tried.
Like someone who has given up on life.
Almost. Hang on, I gotta take a piss. So we sit down to breakfast and we talk about, because neither of them could get the day off. It was a Friday. So like they were talking about shit to do in the area in downtown.
Are they just not telling you this?
Oh no, he told me before. They'd have to cut their honeymoon short a day to have that day off. And they didn't want to do that, and I didn't want them to do that, and we talked about it.
I see.
Yeah, so Lisa worked downtown, and, they only had the one car, so he had to drop her off downtown anyways, so they gave me a ride. He stopped in front of her office, and we both got out, and she looked at me, and then she looked away, and she said, "It was nice to meet you." And then she smiled without showing her teeth and went into work. I turned back, and Dave was gone. But, yeah, downtown Albany is pretty cool. I found a used bookstore, and they had a copy of Tombs of Atuan. You ever read any of the Earthsea books?
Can't say I have.
They're magic. I was obsessed with them as a kid. Tombs of Atuan is the best one. They're about this wizard, and he's stealing this magic ring from, like, this labyrinth of sentient darkness, and, yeah, so I found it for $1, and I was excited. And I grabbed a coffee and a bench, and I read the whole book. It's not very long. So I finished it, and I didn't know what else to do. But I was hungry at the time, and I went and I found this burger place, and I grabbed a burger, and I had a beer with that burger, and then I had another beer. And then I thought about ordering one, and I thought, might as well go find a bar. And anyways, long story short, I got drunk, played some pool, almost got laid, and then took the bus back up to Dave and Lisa's neighborhood. I didn't want to call for a ride because it was late. It was like 11. So I got there, and the door was locked. So I rang the doorbell, and Dave came and he got the door, and he was in his boxers. And he said I could have called him for a ride, and I told him I didn't see any point in waking him. So, I had the bus schedule and all that shit. And, but as he said goodnight to me, behind him, just before he closed the door, it was late and I was drunk, and the only light in the room was the street light by their window, but I saw Lisa behind him, and it looked like there was a hose going into the base of her neck, right by her collarbone.
Is it possible she was hooked up to a CPAP machine? You said yourself you were impaired and the lighting wasn't very good.
That actually never occurred to me.
It also accounted for the mechanical humming you heard.
It would. But no, it was going into her neck. I think I saw it right. Now I do. That night, I just told myself, honestly, I didn't tell myself anything. I just assumed I'd seen it wrong, and I didn't think about it. You ever think about that phrase? How do you see something wrong? How does that ever explain anything? I just accepted, without question, that because I hadn't slept well the night before and because I had 8 or 9 beers that night, that I was actively hallucinating. Not only that, I'd done mushrooms, I'd done acid. I know what it's like to hallucinate, but this, it was clear, it was solid, and I was lucid enough to get myself home by bus in a strange city, and yet I accepted, without question, that what I had seen was a hallucination, based on nothing but the fact that I didn't want to think about it at the time. But I didn't. I went to bed.
Well, our eyes do deceive us sometimes.
And sometimes we know what we saw, and we tell ourselves we don't.
So, you really believe you really did see a hose going into this woman's neck?
Yeah, just above her collarbone.
Interesting.
So, like I said, I just went straight to sleep. Now, I usually don't remember my dreams, but the dreams I had that week, the one I had that night, I remember it like it happened. Okay, you're a psychologist. You ever heard of dreams that start with you waking up? I mean, it happens all the times in movies and kids' shows, but you ever heard of it happening in real life?
Dreams are not really my area of expertise.
But dreams don't usually have beginnings or ends, right? They always start in the middle, don't they?
Dream psychology is a complicated enigmatic field in which I am not very well versed.
Okay, fair enough. But do you want to hear about my dream?
You can tell me whatever you want, but I have to warn you in advance, I don't interpret dreams.
Yeah, I get it. You're not a dream guy.
I mention it because it's been an issue with other patients in the past.
Yeah, I get you. Sorry, I didn't mean to snap you there.
I accept your apology.
So, Lisa wakes me up in my dream. My dream starts with Lisa waking me up. And she shook me and she said, "Get up. I want to show you something." She was naked and she was phosphorescent and her hair was dripping wet. It was the first time I saw her without makeup. She had faint acne scars. And I followed her into the kitchen and I started, I don't know, I was panicking. I couldn't breathe. It was hot, it was dark, and it stank. And I started thinking she'd led me into a trap. And she looked at me. And she looked me in the eyes. And she pointed at the counter. And I looked down, and I was wearing her engagement ring. And I took it off, and I put it on the counter where she pointed. And I followed her into the hallway. And I felt like I could breathe in the hallway. It was cool. And it was like walking into air conditioning on a hot day. So she goes through the front door, and there's this light, and I follow her, but the light is a light bulb, and I'm drowning in a bathtub, and someone is holding me down, and then I woke up.
I imagine a dream like that would impact your mood the following day.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I woke up at 3 and couldn't get back to sleep. And of course, it's awkward going to a wedding rehearsal where you're the best man and you just had the most vivid dream of your life about the bride naked.
Well, you can't control what you dream.
Yeah, obviously, but it's the same as if I'd seen her naked in, like, the window or something and she didn't know, It's something I wasn't supposed to see that I saw. And honestly, I can't say I didn't want to see.
Did you have feelings for this woman?
I mean, not per se. I mean, she was hot, and she seemed like a nice lady. I wouldn't say that I had any more feelings for her than for any other hot lady who was nice. I mean, as far as that goes.
Okay, I understand.
It's like, okay, I wasn't embarrassed per se to have had the dream. It ain't that weird to meet a hot lady and then dream about her naked. But it wasn't a wet dream. It was a nightmare. But it's still, okay, you see a woman naked and it's by accident, and that's a freebie, but I don't know.
The fact that your mind had conjured up these images of her naked gave you some sense of culpability.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. No, it's not that. I think it would have been easier if it had been a wet dream. I'd have known where that was coming from. I'd met a hot woman and lizard brain wanted to fuck her. It was like, I was as horny as anyone. I wouldn't have thought that was weird. But what did, it felt like, okay, I know this sounds like fucking psychobabble, but I don't think I dreamed about her because I wanted to see her naked. I think she came to me in my dream.
What makes you say that?
I mean, I don't know. For one thing, she didn't look like, whenever I'd had wet dreams about women in the past, they always looked like I'd pictured them, you know? And Lisa didn't look quite how I'd pictured her, you know? Like, she had nipple piercings. And, like I said, she had acne scars. But honestly, no, it's not that. I don't know, or I guess I should say why I believe. But I honestly believe Lisa came to me in my dream that night and she wanted to tell me something. Some really personal shit that I didn't understand, except to know that I didn't want to understand it. So I chose not to. It wasn't hard. I wrote it off the way I would write off a weird sex dream. Maybe take it as a sign that I needed to get out more when I got home. Talk to more women, you know?
So you believe then that it was just a dream?
I told myself that I did. I don't think I ever did.
So what do you believe it was, if not a dream?
I mean, it was a dream. But it wasn't just a dream. It was... Okay. I already sound crazy. It was like Lisa came to me in my dream to tell me something, and this woman, this morning, she didn't know. She didn't remember, but she'd shown me something I wasn't supposed to see. Look, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I gotta tell this story, and I ain't gonna lie. So yeah, it's crazy, and I believe it. I don't know how I can reconcile this with, or what I saw later, with anything that I believe, but I guess, you know, more things under heaven and earth and all that. How's that go?
What else did you see?
More things under heaven and earth that are written or something. You know the quote?
I know what you're referring to. It's from Hamlet. I don't remember exactly how it goes.
Yeah.
What else did you see?
Okay, so you gotta understand, there were like 20 people at the wedding, which, again, is on a Tuesday. And most of them were driving from Rotterdam, where we'd grown up, which, like I said, is about 20 minutes away from Albany. I think we were the last people in America to find out when the Twin Towers went down.
How did people react?
You know that unity everyone talks about, where we were all one nation and suddenly nothing else mattered? I think the closest I experienced to that shit being real was on that day. The band didn't play, but we paid them anyways. There was no dancing, no toasts, no flirting, no arguments. All of us, we spoke very little. Some of us ate and drank little, or didn't eat or drink at all. Some of us had plate after plate. Some of us got really drunk.
This was the most unified you felt at the time after 9/11.
Yeah, honestly, I stand by that. You know, I remember a lot of us standing around jerking each other off about how much we were going to fuck up Al-Qaeda, and that was all good, but I never felt so close to so many people. At that reception, nobody put on a brave face. Everybody knew we were fucked, and that there was no point in hiding it, and it was fucked, and we were fucked, and there was nothing that could unfuck us. That was unity. That was what united everyone, the trauma, and knowing that everything was about to get way worse for everyone. Everything else was just the Bush administration tricking us into supporting the invasion of Iraq.
I'm not entirely sure I agree, but I think I see what you mean.
So like I said, I was supposed to fly out that night at midnight, and obviously my flight was canceled. I hadn't budgeted for a hotel that night, so I asked Dave if I could stay on the couch, and he hesitated for a second, and he said, "Sure, it don't really feel like much of a wedding night anyways." Now, he and I were both already drunk by the time the sun went down, but Lisa was sober, so she drove us back. None of us said anything the whole ride back. I felt so bad for them. And then I felt guilty, because here thousands of people had just died in burning rubble, and I'm worried about a fucking wedding, you know?
It's natural to feel more concerned for those we know.
Yeah. So anyways, she goes to bed, and he goes into... So he comes out, and we sit together at the kitchen table, and we keep drinking, and we had, like, 4 or 5 cases of beer and a fuckload of champagne left over. So my memory of the conversation is pretty hazy, but there's one point at that night that I'll never forget. We were talking about... I think we were talking about... I made some kind of joke about Twilight Zone or something, and we laughed. And then we both were quiet for a couple of seconds, and there was this feeling in the room. Like we both got somber, or he got somber and then I got somber, or the darkness in the room just got a little darker, and the air just got a little heavier, and the stench just got a little thicker, and the sound of mechanical humming in the other room just got a little louder. And I was looking at the fridge, and Dave said, "I met the devil." And I looked at him, and he was looking at me like he was serious. And I said, "What?" And he said, "I met the devil, or a devil." And he told me that he'd made a deal with the devil. And I asked him what the deal was, and he said he didn't want to talk about it. And he apologized for bringing it up. I didn't know what to make of that. At the time, I remember thinking that he at least genuinely believed he had met the devil.
Did you believe he had met the devil?
Not at the time.
But what about now?
I mean, I think... Okay, so I mean, I don't know if I believe in the devil, but like, if there was a devil, I mean, I think... It's hard to explain what I think. I don't know.
Real quick, I don't want to interrupt, but we've got 10 minutes left.
Okay, yeah. So the next day was the type of day that day drinking was invented for. We got up, and we had some mimosas because we were obviously hungover, and Lisa made us breakfast again, and yeah, I was supposed to fly out the night before, and they were supposed to fly out that day, but we suddenly had nothing to do, and obviously, all of us were in a funk. You ever get that, where you didn't set out to get drunk, but then 3 beers in, you realize, like, oh yeah, I'm getting drunk today. That's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, you're not drunk yet, but all the same, it's too late to not get drunk and you know it, you know?
I think I understand. You felt as though you were not in control of yourself.
Nothing so dramatic. I've always been a drinker, but I've never been a drunk, you know? I could have stopped myself if there had been any reason to, but there wasn't. There just wasn't. It wasn't the type of day where there was any reason to not get drunk. So I started drinking, and it was like, okay, this is what we're doing today.
Okay, I think I understand the sentiment.
So, yeah, after breakfast, of all fucking things, we played Monopoly. It was the first and last time I played a game of Monopoly all the way through to its conclusion. We started at about noon, and it took 8 hours, and we went through a bottle of champagne and 2 cases of beer and 4 packs of cigarettes between the 3 of us. And after that, we all decided to call it an early night. I wasn't tired, but I was drunk and depressed, so I fell asleep pretty much immediately.
How long was your flight delayed?
I got to fly out the next day, but... Okay, this next part of the story is why I haven't told anyone about this, because I know you won't believe me. Nobody would believe me, and I know that, and I don't resent that, because you have to be crazy to believe me, right? Like, I don't know what I believe I saw, and it is so much easier to believe that I just had another weirdly vivid dream, but I gotta tell you, I don't remember this as a dream, and I can't convince myself that this didn't actually happen.
Perhaps it would be best to just tell me what happened from your perspective.
Yeah, okay, so Dave woke me up, and he was wearing gray sweatpants and a baggy crewneck sweater, and he said, "Wake up, I want to show you something," and I got up.
That's sort of an interesting inversion of your dream. She was naked and he was fully clothed, but both of them said the same thing.
Shut the fuck up.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry. No, that wasn't right. It's just... I'm realizing more and more that I really need to tell this story. And it's hard because I already know you won't believe me. And I know that doesn't give me the right to tell you to shut the fuck up, but I know you're only trying to help. And you are helping. I have no right to get mad or defensive. I'm sorry.
I accept your apology. I will refrain from interrupting you until you've finished your story.
Thank you. Okay. So Dave woke me up, and he told me he had to show me something. And he took me into the bedroom. And the first thing I noticed was that she was naked. So I looked away because, I thought she was sleeping, and I'm not that kind of guy, you know? So Dave grabs me by the shirt, and he says, "No, don't look away." And that was when I got a good look at his face. And if he wasn't blackout drunk, he was pretty damn close. And he was crying, and he was sweating, and he reached behind me, and he turned the lights on. It fucking stank in there, man. That fucking chemical smell and the sweat and bad meat and cum. And my eyes took a while to adjust to the light. He was still holding my shirt, but there was nothing threatening in his demeanor. He just looked, I don't know, resigned and yet somehow still desperate. He said, "It's okay to look. That's not Lisa." And now that I think about it, his saying that really didn't give me the right to look, because I didn't believe him. That's the other reason why I don't think this was a dream. Because I didn't believe him. She had the same nipple piercings she'd had in my dream. Probably doesn't say anything good about me that that's the first thing I noticed. And there was a hose going into her neck, pumping some dark purple-brown substance into an incision in her neck. And that was the next thing I noticed. Her side of the bed, they didn't sleep on a full-size bed. He had a twin bed that was pushed up to a metal table with gutters. And there was some kind of black fluid coming out of her ankle in a slow, thick stream. And there were two big tanks. One beside the bed and the other underneath. The one beside the bed had a pump attached, and that was pumping the fluid into Lisa's body. And the other was under the bed, collecting whatever was coming out of her ankle. Somehow, the last thing I noticed was the autopsy incision on her torso. It wasn't bleeding, and it showed no signs of healings, and it was held together with button hooks. Button hooks that were sewn into the flesh of her belly, and, Jesus fuck. He undid them. And no, let me finish, please. I'm okay. Honestly, this happened years ago. Just listen. He undid the button hooks, and he opened her up. And where there should have been fat and muscle, there was just wet, shredded fabric. And he starts yanking it out in huge handfuls and throwing it onto the table and onto his bed. I can't describe the smell. It was fucking vile. And where her stomach should be, there was this cage with two rats. A plastic cage with a tube that comes down from her mouth, just high enough that the rats can't reach it. And they're filthy and diseased, but well-fed. On the cage, there are painted weird markings. They were laid out like writing, and each of the symbols had... They almost looked like something. I've never seen anything quite like them before or since, but they were familiar somehow. I felt like I could almost read them. And like the key to understanding them was in some obscure childhood memory, and I hadn't thought about it for years. But he pulled me close to look, and I saw that the same writing was carved into her ribs. And he pulled back her lips, and it was carved into her teeth. Some word or sentence in some esoteric language I felt like I could almost read. And I looked back to ask him what the fuck was going on. And then I noticed he was already explaining it, or he was trying to. He was blackout drunk. And I could hardly make out a word he had said. But he was saying something about it was an accident and he just lost control or something like that. So I grabbed his arm and I said, "Dave, what the fuck is that?" And he said, "It's a puppet." And I said, "Where's Lisa?" And he said, "Lisa's dead. That puppet is made from her body." And he started rambling about how he thought it would be like still having her, but having to take care of her, like she had a medical condition or something, and how he really did love her. And I interrupted him. I said, "Dave," I said, "if that's a puppet, who's operating it?" And he said, "I don't know."
Have you finished your story?
Yeah, I flew home the next day. I told you you wouldn't believe me.
Well, if you say you saw something, I believe you saw something.
Yeah, but what?
Well, what do you think?
I don't know.